Chapter 109, Tempest, the Solo Chief Knight. 9 days into the tournament, Dale stood with his arms crossed, looking at his position on the leaderboard rankings when Orwin tapped him, gesturing behind. Dale turned, chuckling as he saw Snow walking into the city square, which was scarcely populated with students. The moment Snow entered, he became the center of attention, mostly because he was too handsome to be overlooked, even though most students were already used to seeing that face. "Look who's ranked 8th, the first man to change the history of the Glimmer Wing Butterfly," Dale said. At least, even if he wasn't in the top 10, there were 2 sophomores there, and one of them was Snow. Snow walked up to Dale and looked up at the leaderboard. Seeing his frown, Dale shook his head. "You're looking for Godfrey, right?" Snow turned to him. "You'll find him at the bottom," Dale added. Snow looked and saw Godfrey's name ranked at the very last place, with 0 points. Did he face the seniors and have to be taken away from the tournament? Sounds like what Godfrey would do, Snow thought. "Only 5 days remain. I want to organize a team to strike one of the mini-bosses. The target is Percival. Who would have thought he'd be so lucky to kill and maintain a mini-boss zone for so long?" Dale's statement made Snow's eyes flash. He recalled the giant water ball, over 32 meters high, with John's summon locked within, and a massive beast that grew from 100 feet to 500, coiled around it. Had Percival not been merciful, John and his summon would both have died. Despite John being on the winning side when the battle began, the stronger student became apparent in the end. Percival's summon had such great control over the elements, and its size and hard scales countered John's summon perfectly. Snow had never seen John so helpless in his entire life. It felt just like when Mountain repelled his silver glimmer and blew a hole in his butterfly's chest. Though John escaped when Percival released him, the few who watched that battle knew Manhattan's official king was beneath the Shadow Club's ace. John and Percival were in a fight. John lost, Snow said softly. Dale's eyes widened. What? At that moment, a sudden chill enveloped them, and everyone else in the entire city. A few seconds later, snow began to fall from the dark skis. Snow caught a snowflake, his eyes shaking. Isolde's wyvern has evolved into a dragon, a powerful one at that, to be able to cause such a phenomenon. "Man, I now understand that I'm not in the same league with her, and all that beauty is for someone deserving. But that person can't be someone who couldn't even last to the end of the tournament. Godfrey must have been as stubborn as usual and paid dearly for it this time," Dale scowled. "I paid dearly for it," Godfrey said inwardly, his voice descending into a deep baritone as he stretched a claw toward Tempest, who stood before his throne. "I paid 7 days of no sleep and consistent hunting to gather enough cores. Let's see where this one takes you." Tempest, already at tier 7.6, took the core, and the moment he was done absorbing it, his size, which had been stagnant, finally rose to 8.2 feet. A metal formed a floating circle above his head like a halo. It was golden, with 2 high points at the front like a mountain split into 2. The image of the sun with short rays glowed between his 2 golden eyes. The other parts of his face were hidden in darkness, but Tempest was already looking like a celestial being, truly magnificent, as the creature he was fused within. However, the greatest change was his greatsword. It had become a double-bladed greatsword, 10 feet in length. The blades were 4 feet each, and the hilt that connected both blades was 2 feet long. This mighty weapon, which looked like it could weigh a ton, was twirled effortlessly by Tempest. "I have regained my main weapons and abilities, Duke. Let me face Dracula once more," Tempest's voice rumbled as he rose to tier 7.9, the pinnacle of the high tier. "Oh, we will," Godfrey said, walking up to the stone tablet whose inscribed words glowed and changed. "Summon Chief Blade Knight of the Golden Order. Type Hybrid. Tier 7.9. Potential 8.5. Description: an 8.5-foot tall anointed Chief Knight. Along with all his monstrous battle capabilities, he has the golden halo above his head, which can heal and rejuvenate all who have sworn the Golden Oath once expanded." Godfrey's eyes narrowed. He finally saw it. Tempest might not have troops under him, but he was the core of the army. His personal battle skills aside, this golden halo of his could keep the Golden Order Knights fighting endlessly. As long as Tempest stood, an entire army would not fall. Well, the healing wasn't exactly perfect. Healed wounds left scars, like the one on Godfrey's thigh and others on his body. Apart from that, Tempest couldn't regenerate lost limbs or organs, but his healing could be applied to a great number, a feat most healers were incapable of. Before his eyes, Tempest entered blackout state and rose to tier 8.9. Godfrey opened his eyes to the outside world as Tempest, Mountain, and Ballista came out of their portals. All four of them stared at the field of stakes. They could see new stakes, and on them were Golden Order knights who had sacrificed themselves to ensure Godfrey's escape. Godfrey clenched his teeth as his eyes hardened. On his own, his strength could rival that of an 8.3 summon. His advantage lay in great strength and control over lightning. Werewolves burst out of the soil once more, and bats flew from the castle. They had all respawned, so he was facing Dracula's army in its peak state. Mountain and Ballista summoned another 300 knights, all standing in disciplined lines behind Godfrey. Some heavy infantry knights held spears bearing flags of the Golden Sun. Arrows tore through the air in great numbers. It was time for a second round against Dracula. After the bow knights unleashed several volleys, the heavy infantry knights charged, colliding with the werewolves with an aggression that even surpassed that of the beasts. Medea Tempest flew into the cloud of giant bats, spinning like a living Beyblade. Blood fell like rain from the sky, along with the bodies of dozens of bats. As Tempest moved, his wings spread lightning, electrocuting the unfortunate ones and sending their smoking corpses plummeting down into the chaotic battlefield. With a battle cry, Tempest threw the 10-foot-long double-bladed greatsword, and it spun through the air like a helicopter's blades. The huge gust of wind that followed soon turned crimson as the sword sliced through 100 bats, scattering their blood and severed bodies into the air. Still rotating at the same velocity, it cut through a giant werewolf standing in Godfrey's way. It struck the ground, unleashing a powerful gust of wind as Tempest descended, his tendrils drifting gently behind him, their length stretching as far back as 2 rows of stakes. The chief knight pulled his sword out of the earth as Godfrey pushed open the door to the castle, revealing the vast hall once more. This time, Dracula sat lazily on a throne, sipping from a glass cup filled halfway with crimson liquid. "I had a feeling you'd be back." The final boss rose to his feet, standing at an impressive height of 9 feet. A dark cloak covered his body, its long collar blending with his ink-black hair. "You've lost before, what makes you think you won't lose again?" Dracula asked calmly. "I'm not the same Godfrey you fought a week ago." Godfrey's reply made Dracula chuckle. "Well, that's one thing we have in common, I'm not the same as before. Back then I had access to plenty of fresh blood, but you see, after I woke from my slumber, my blood wine cellar was filled with damaged goods. I've been starving for God knows how long, and it has made me weak, luckily." Dracula took the glass cup and emptied it. "The blood of your crusaders quenched that burning thirst, but just a little." He calmly dropped the glass, his crimson eyes sharpening as Tempest stepped forward. "Duke Godfrey, let me have the honor of this battle." Tempest rose into the air, the sun between his eyes glowing brightly as did his wings. "Let me reclaim my honor from this blood-sucking vermin." The loathing in Tempest's voice was thick. It made Dracula furious. Seeing this, Godfrey placed the tip of his longsword on the floor and rested his palms on the pommel. "You have my permission." Hearing that, Tempest flew at blinding speed, stabbing his sword toward Dracula. The air exploded as both forces collided. When the dust cleared, Godfrey saw Dracula holding the top of Tempest's double-bladed greatsword with one hand. Dracula didn't take a single step back. The result of their clash caused web-like cracks to spread across the stone floor beneath their feet. "Is that all?" Dracula bared his fangs. Just then, the runes on the greatsword gleamed, and an invisible force launched Dracula into the wall. Debris rained down as the wall cracked. Lightning crackled through the greatsword as Tempest hurled it toward the wall. Dracula evaded just before it pierced deep into the stone. In the next moment, Tempest appeared before the sword, pulled it out, and launched it at Dracula again. The vampire flickered backward, but the sword, rotating like a whirlwind, chewed through 6 thick stone pillars before Tempest caught it. Dracula blasted a massive wave of flames, but Tempest was agile enough to soar out of reach. He made a wide arc, diving at Dracula from the right. Dracula transformed into a giant bat and slammed Tempest into the floor so hard that the stones shattered to dust. Cracks spread across the floor, the pillars, and up the walls of the great hall. The bat's entire body burst into flames as it clawed at Tempest ferociously. With a deep grunt, Tempest called for lightning, and it answered. A torrent of lightning, greater than Godfrey had ever seen, fell through the roof. Such lightning should leave only the bones of a 9-lord tier. After all, lightning descent is Tempest's most powerful skill, Godfrey thought. his eyes fixed on the giant bat, which had only severe burns when the lightning stopped. The wounds were already healing as the bat roared. Tempest swiftly swung his greatsword, slicing off the head of the giant bat. It rolled across the ground, reverting to Dracula's humanoid head right before the tip of Godfrey's longsword. "There is the vermin's head, my lord," Tempest said between heavy breaths. His armor bore cuts, dents, and holes caused by receiving damage from his own lightning descent. He was on one knee, gripping his mighty sword. "You have reclaimed your honor, Tempest," Godfrey said, walking straight to the throne and slowly sitting upon it. He looked around, muttering, "This hall is barely standing." This fight strengthened Godfrey's assumption about Tempest. According to the murals on the walls of his chambers, 2,000 Golden Order knights were slain in their conquest to kill the Lightning Phoenix. That formidable creature was what lay within Tempest's body. He killed it," Gregory stuttered, his eyes wide as he watched Godfrey sit upon the throne of the final boss. Sebastian smiled softly. "I'm afraid Godfrey is officially among the top 10 elites in the entire school. His willpower is unprecedented." Meanwhile, in the city square, the rankings underwent a sudden change that no one saw coming. Everyone was watching closely, expecting Isolde to surpass Damien now that her wyvern had evolved into a dragon, but to their shock, an unexpected name rose to the first position with a total of 100,000 points. He had surpassed Damien, who stood at 95,000, and Isolde at 94,000 points. As everyone stood speechless, Snow narrowed his eyes. "I knew it, he had to be planning something daring, but I didn't think it would be killing the final boss. This is ridiculous," a student said a day later, as Godfrey gained 50,000 points, far outranking those below him. Others rose by 5,000 or 7,000 at maximum, but without even fighting a single challenger, Godfrey now had 150,000 points. Seeing Snow, Dale waved at him. "Other top 10 rankers have all gone after Godfrey. Defeating him is more lucrative than maintaining their zones. Won't you go?" "Why would I go to a bloodbath?" Snow replied coolly. Dale raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying Godfrey would win?" "That's not possible," Snow replied, "but it won't be easy to defeat someone who killed the final boss." Rick's orange hair danced in the wind as he rode his 8.5 Lord-tier horned tiger horse toward Dracula's zone. When he got close, his eyes narrowed, and Rick stopped his summon. It wasn't the dark expanse filled with stakes and corpses upon them that caught his attention, but the translucent shield dome that protected the entire castle and its surroundings. Within the dome stood heavily armored knights in an elite array, as though expecting a great battle. Floating above the castle was Tempest, his long tendrils lighting up the place with a bright golden glow, his massive double-bladed greatsword gripped firmly in one gauntleted hand. Seeing those powerful tendrils coursing with such immense lightning made Rick squint. "Is this the summon of one teenager? It feels like I'm looking at the army of the actual final boss." Rick heard loud sounds that prompted him to turn. His eyes first landed on Tyler, who stood on the head of an 11-foot-tall black widow spider. Not too far to its left came Vin, riding a 10-foot-tall malevolent dragon lion, a chimeric creature with the forelimbs of a dragon, a lion's head, fox's ears, and a crimson mane. And to her right was another 10-foot-tall summon, the yin-yang gorilla, a black and white beast with 4 arms and imposing muscle mass. It walked like a king and stood by Tyler's right, its huge, muscular arms crossed beneath its chest. Tyler's cat-shaped eyes narrowed, and she gasped at the sight of the knights. "If I didn't know any better, I'd think there was a powerful dungeon boss in there." The awe in her tone displeased Damien and Vin, who exchanged glances from the corners of their eyes. "I'll test the waters," Rick said. He knew that if he defeated Godfrey, he would gain half of the 150,000 points, a good amount of which would still belong to him even if the others interfered. A 12-foot-tall projection of his summon appeared and galloped toward the shield dome, its spiral-lined horn aimed forward like a spear. As it pierced the translucent dome, the barrier cracked and blew outward, launching the projection back. Rick galloped on his summon as the projection faded. Hundreds of arrows came at him, but all froze midair. Even the knights couldn't move, suspended mid-motion. This was the deadliest ability Rick's summon possessed, the power to freeze any kinetic force. Once activated, no one could move, as movement itself wasn't allowed. All that kinetic energy would then be absorbed by the horned tiger horse, making it even faster. It was this talent that made Rick one of the top 10 elites in Manhattan, for it had the potential to make him an invincible. Rick smirked as he rode past the great number of knights. Once he came within range of anything moving, their movement would stop. Even arrows would pause midair and fall to the ground after he was long gone. I knew my ability countered his, but this was easier than expected. What's the use of an army when they can't harm a single foe? Rick snickered inwardly, his heart pounding with exhilaration. Just then, the knight with tendril wings, Tempest, suddenly lifted his double-bladed greatsword and moved like a blur, appearing beside Rick in the next instant and swinging his massive weapon at him. Rick's eyes widened. Rows of trees burst from the earth on both sides as the horned tiger horse galloped even faster toward the castle, through a path paved by these rows of trees, an adaptive skill Rick called Tiger's Path. Prepare to use Speed Burst when we get to the castle, do. Rick's eyes widened as Tempest landed before the castle, striking the earth with his sword. Lightning burst outward, blasting Rick and his summons several meters backward. He tumbled several times before collapsing. His eyes widened when he felt something behind him. Turning, he saw 50 heavy infantry knights aiming their spears at him, forming a semicircle with some spears pointed slightly upward. That way, even when he paused motion, he would still be caged in. What are these things? How did they form such a tactic so quickly? Did their summoner give the order? I thought he was inside the castle. As if that wasn't enough, all around him were arrows, all perfectly aimed to drop down even if he were to move. Such unreal skill and teamwork made Rick's heart shake. What was this absurdity? He had never felt this helpless against anyone, except when he faced Damien. He failed. Let's move, Damien said, removing his glasses as he saw Godfrey walk out of the castle, his eyes fixed on them. I knew you'd all come after my points. This tournament isn't just about defeating a strong opponent, Tyler said with a faint smile. It's also about protecting the spoils. We're here for you. What are you going to do about it? Vin's eyes hardened. You have an army, but I'll melt them in an instant. When Tyler saw Godfrey's still defiant expression, she raised an eyebrow. Do you have any surprises for us? You'd be foolish to think we're going to attack individually against you, who have the advantage of an army. And since we're not doing that, it's unfortunate for someone of your strength, but you'll undoubtedly lose, Damien stated with a placid look. In that moment, a massive gust of cold wind blew against their faces as a white-scaled dragon, with horns that looked like blue crystals, descended from the clouds. It was 75 feet long from head to tail, with a wingspan of over 100 feet wide. The wind generated from its wings alone caused a huge gale. When it landed, the dragon could be measured to be 17 feet tall from the shoulder down. Including the neck and head would make it almost 25 feet tall. On its back was Isolde. I highly doubt that, she said, as Grace roared aggressively at all the summons of the seniors. From the other side, Percival manifested out of water, looking at the seniors as he walked toward Godfrey. This looks like a group of seniors against our king. Shadow Club has a right to defend him, as a group too. So you've been there the whole time? Rick frowned, still in a dilemma as he remained caught in the trap of the Golden Order Knights. The moment he let go of his ability, grievous injuries awaited. Well then, Vin clenched his fists. His malevolent dragon lion took 2 steps forward before Damien spoke up. Don't. Vin snapped his head toward him. Are we going to let that sophomore take first place? Leave it, Tyler replied. Her summon turned back at her command. Godfrey's summons retracted, and Rick also left, though with a few wounds from arrows his summon couldn't dodge. On their way, Damien faced the gloomy Vin. The Pendragon will take first position, so it won't be a troublesome sophomore. Damien continued as Vin glared at him. At least if it's her, we won't lose much of our prestige. But Godfrey, that's his name, right? It is, Rick replied. If there's one thing I've discovered about him, it's that he has always proved others wrong. We'll try to bring him to the club. He's already declared himself king. You think someone like that will listen to you? Vin mocked. Then it will be a hassle, but it's not everyone he can prove wrong. Damien's eyes gleamed dangerously. Imagine using him for our underground fights. He'll rake in a lot. Tyler, you've worked on most of the stubborn ones, how about this one? Rick said. Tyler rolled her hair and spat out, her teeth clenched slightly. He's a tough one, he might not budge. While the seniors conversed about their next plan, since Godfrey's strength had piqued their interest, Godfrey stared at Percival and Isolde. You're crazy, has anyone ever told you that? Percival scoffed. On the other hand, Isolde descended from Grace, flipping her hair as she smiled radiantly at Godfrey. In that moment, Godfrey felt a familiar warmth he had not felt in his heart for a long time, prompting him to smile in return. Grace is now a dragon, Godfrey said, as the white dragon stared calmly at him, her head lifted high. She growled softly in acknowledgement. Isolde chuckled as she ascended the stairs to meet Godfrey, but froze as Tempest descended, hovering menacingly behind him. What an impressive-looking knight. I haven't really seen this one in action, but it looks imposing, Percival said in slight awe, but he and Godfrey both glanced at each other when they saw Isolde staring at Tempest in a frozen state. Isolde's breath quickened. That bright sun symbol in between Tempest's eyes made her remember the painting she drew years ago, a painting of Tempest flying toward a skinny giant with metal chains joined to thick metal balls around its wrists. There was blood everywhere. That dream was one of her first nightmares, and she clearly remembered the golden halo and more specifically, that bright sun symbol. At first, it was a nightmare, but after having the dream several times, everything came into place, the Great Vanishing. An event where tons of white gates appeared and took people, all of which happened before Godfrey's fourth summon. Has it already happened while we were in here? Her heart drummed. Isolde, are you all right? As Godfrey approached her, he suddenly found himself in the student hall, seated with all the other students. In less than 3 minutes, every student in the dungeon was in their seats. Everyone was puzzled. What was going on? There were still a few days left. All the teachers were already assembled, and Sebastian mounted the podium. Godfrey frowned when Isolde entwined her fingers with his own and held them tight. We have disturbing news to share, Sebastian began before Godfrey could ask Isolde what was wrong. A few hours ago, King-Queen tears around the world suddenly began to vanish. About 40 minutes ago, the Pendragon King-Queen tear and the rest of the King-Queen tears all over Manhattan and beyond were gone. Godfrey's eyes widened. Isolde. We are not certain that they are dead, Sebastian continued, but apparently they are being taken by white gates. No lesser tier has been taken, but the security of the globe has been thrown into disarray. We advise everyone to remain within the boundaries of the school until further notice. Isaac slammed the door to the Shadow Club open and stormed in. Have you heard what's going on? We have, Godfrey said. Lucy and Percival looked at him, all with the same concern for Isolde, who had left quite speedily after they were dismissed. Where's Isolde? Isaac asked. The entire school's in panic. I heard Tyler's crying because of her mother and Damien's. Wind blew Isaac's hair from behind. He stopped and turned, sighing in relief when he saw Isolde with a book. Whatever's happening will last for 72 hours, and all of them will return. At least those who survive, Isolde said firmly. What do you mean? Lucy asked. Isolde opened her book for all of them to see the huge painting of a tree that reached the clouds. I can see the future, it's irregular. However, this tree is called the mana tree, and those large golden fruits are original fruits. What's happening is evolution. Our world's tiers are increasing. Once the King-Queen tiers return as greater tiers, depending on how many fruits they eat, will face greater dungeons. But Mr. Edwin said it would happen in 100 years. Well, it won't, but that isn't the main problem. The main problem, and the reason the school brought us back, is because without the King-Queen tiers, Kane fanatics will start running wild. Arthur Pendragon sat on the saddle of his silver dragon, whose scales glistened like sharpened blades. Its sheer size made Isolde's dragon look like a child. He looked at the vast tree, whose green branches reached the clouds at its tip, and whose roots stretched farther than his eyes could see. Hundreds of other summoners with their summons were gathered there. Some had mighty eagles whose wings spanned several hundred feet, some had small beasts, others had massive, gigantic ones like his dragon, or even bigger. His eyes locked on a group of humanoid summoners moving as one. Leading them was a man with an Oni Ronin by his side. Vagabonds! Retrieving his dragon, Arthur manifested vast wings and shot toward the base of the tree, where the others were gathered. There was writing carved into the tree. It is I, Adam. I have no idea how long it has been, but in my journey, I have discovered Earth will soon be granted this opportunity before the next phase of Earth's evolution. We humans are cherished, and so we gain the ultimate power of summoning. I know some of you have guessed, and you are right, the peak isn't King tier. There is the Throne tier 13, 0, 15, 5, Saint tier 15, 6, 17, 8, Divine tier 17, 9, 20, 5, and finally the Origin tier 20, 6, 24, 9. Unfortunately, after evolving to the Great Sage equals the heavens, I still couldn't step into the Origin tier. Eat the fruits of this tree. Eat as much as you can, because dungeons with existences of the tiers I listed above will soon invade Earth. As for me, my adventures will never stop. It sounds like he's still alive. After 100 years, Arthur's irises shrank. In the next moment, claws came for his neck. This was an opportunity. Those who ate the most would rule the world, and those who fell behind would regret it. But before that, they would take out the opposition before it had the chance to grow. And chaos erupted. Arthur grabbed the claws, and the shockwaves burst outward like a huge gale, able to toss a human being like a leaf in the storm, but it didn't faze others around him. To them, this was as light as a slightly rough wind, yet their faces were all grim, especially Arthur, whose eyes trembled as he saw that the man who attacked him was actually his close friend, whose dragon's major factor was healing and invisibility. I see. Arthur's eyes darted to his left, to the group of people approaching them. They all wore black cloaks, covering their heads to their feet. Leading them was a woman with one of the most perfect shapes Arthur had ever seen, not too busty, not too slim, just perfect, and with a captivating charm that rubbed Arthur the wrong way. It made his face harden. Her hood was down, revealing her face, partly covered by a nose mask, yet she was still strikingly alluring. Such looks could only mean one thing. The moment Arthur thought that, a portal flared up above the woman, and a female humanoid appeared. Its knees downward were like those of an insect. It had the wings of a moth, and each wing bore the pattern of a huge eye. Let the light of the dark surf be upon you all. The woman, a grand silver moon, trained and raised to become Cain's humble partner, said softly as the king tiers behind Arthur sent their summons charging at her. The eye patterns gleamed, and the summons turned against each other. Not just them, even the summoners faced one another with madness, rage, and hate in their eyes. A few dozen were affected, and at the peak of the tension, Arthur suddenly noticed the Oni Ronin running vertically up the manhwa tree, slashing fruits down and eating some in the process. Seeing this, Arthur waved his hand. Christine, go to the tree now. Christine unleashed her dragon, flying into the sky. Other summoners joined the race, fighting each other over fruits they grabbed at the same time. A fanatic summoned a 12-foot-tall hulking cyclops with a huge warhammer beside Arthur. It swung the hammer at breakneck speed, but Arthur ducked. His portal appeared above, and a giant dragon emerged. Its scales were like polished golden steel, and it had a metal halo with lots of candles round about it. The wax fell down its long neck. With a mighty roar, it swung its claws at the cyclops, launching it backward as it crashed into the ground several times. The esteemed candle-crowned dragon summoner, you're forfeiting your opportunity to grow. Tartar, Grand Silver Moon giggled as she manifested moth wings and flew into the air, while another humanoid summoner, whose summon was a great dark orc chieftain, lunged with the others at Arthur. Seeing its opponents, the dragon breathed liquid wax, yet its heat was several times beyond that of a volcano's depth. It melted King Tears, and the liquid wax also formed a small stream, emitting white steam as it flowed, carving a path through the earth. From the stream, 2 wax golem giants burst out, crushing 2 King Tears who weren't expecting it. Strong dragon, hehe. The great dark orc chieftain licked its lips as if staring at tasty meat and brandished its axe. A loud sound burst out, shattering the surface of the earth as it leapt into the air, swinging its great axe. The candle dragon slapped it away with its tail, breathing more flames at the others, only to see the orc chieftain grab a fruit thrown from above, chew it, and launch its axe. The axe cut deep into the dragon's forearm, prompting it to roar. Arthur looked at his dragon. There's no need to look over there, Lord Arthur. The same man who attacked Manhattan and Polaris during their field trip finally pulled down his hood, revealing the tattoo etched into the center of his forehead. A 10-foot-tall humanoid with grey skin and the head of a jackal, its piercing crimson eyes glowed. It was wrapped from head to toe with the white cloth used to embalm the dead. Shadows drifted around it as if it had emerged from this summon's body. It was Anubis, the summon of one of Cain's generals. I believe God Cain has given us the opportunity, after our long prayers, to kill as many King Tears as we want. And once our summons feed on your mana-rich beasts, we shall rise, the general said calmly as Anubis, his summon, stretched out its golden staff, which had a scythe at the end. Portals of swirling black smoke appeared on 3 sides around Arthur, and hands with claws shot out, attacking him from all sides, hundreds of hands, each trying to drag him. Arthur covered himself with golden scales, cutting dozens of arms as he moved away, but more arms replaced the ones lost. It's toying with me. Arthur frowned and snapped his head toward his dragon, who was being attacked by several humanoid summoners. His allies were few, a great number of them were fighting for fruits above. If this continued, he might not make it. Knowing this, Arthur fused with his dragon and took to the skis. Dozens of hands, the size of a giant's, caught his tail, forcing him to breathe liquid wax fire, melting all of them. Just then, Anubis, fused with its summoner, appeared above him, swinging his scythe at the dragon while it breathed flames at the hands below. Before Arthur could react, a huge gash appeared on the dragon's neck, and he, who was fused with it, felt all the pain as the summoner and summon crashed into the earth. The great dark chieftain brandished his axe, while Anubis calmly descended from the sky. You've already killed quite a few king tiers. No wonder you're one of the strongest in the western region. Arthur grimaced from the excessive bleeding, struggling to rise to his feet. Come, I will take a few before I go. I will make you regret what you did to him, Christine's voice echoed, and a dark shadow enveloped them all. Lifting their heads, they saw a dragon with 4 white feathered wings blanketing the skis. It looked down at them and opened its mouth. Anubis' pupils shrank when he saw a mini black hole forming in the mouth of this strange dragon. Whatever this was, it was beyond a queen tier, and it bore the rage of an angry wife. This was a white feathered dragon, a 16.5 saint tier with a potential of 18.2. After swallowing almost 100 fruits, this dragon could no longer be compared to its previous self. Die, all of you, Christine spoke from within the dragon and launched the black hole, as her husband was pulled up by gravity, right into her claws. Out of the billions of people on Earth, there were not more than 1,000 king tiers, and currently these king tiers, whose summons could shake cities, looked minuscule in comparison to the mana tree. After 48 hours of continuous battle, over 100 king tiers had been lost. Most of the remaining 900 had broken into high tier. Some rose to throne tier with greater potential, a few to saint tier with potentials reaching the divine tier, but as many of them had discovered, the origin tier seemed out of reach. Arian stood before his Oni Ronin. After eating over 300 fruits, his summon now stood at 11 feet tall, with black inscriptions covering its blue skin. Its black hakama rippled around the Ronin's powerful legs. Both the Ronin and his summoner, standing on a branch above the clouds, looked up. The tree still stretched beyond the clouds, its top unknown. In the clouds, dragons, phoenixes, eagles, humanoid summoners, and several strange chimeric beasts fought. The king tiers under the authorities had already begun exercising control by battling to stop others from eating fruits. It's peaceful down here, a voice said. Arian turned to the speaker. It was a man with a long white beard and hair. The lines of his face hinted that he'd once been a charmer in his youth. This man stood on another branch, over 100 meters away, the closest one nearby. Behind him stood a dwarf wearing a wide wizard's hat so large it could serve as an umbrella, with its tip reaching the dwarf's waist. Its eyes glowed like a storm, white and cold. It had thick mustaches, beards, and eyebrows, but its most striking feature was the long smoke pipe, easily half the dwarf's height. The smoke billowing from the pipe formed mirages of different creatures. The current one was a snake-like dragon swimming around the dwarf. The aura of that smoke dragon was easily that of a top-level king tier, and this was just a casual gesture. Not for long, they'll come for us, the authorities, Arian said softly. The Pendragons will side with them, along with other powerhouses. Their numbers will be too much, and those fanatics expect us to bow to their god before offering aid. John Lugard, the old man, chuckled. We are vagabonds. We're wanted criminals who have already survived by a hair's breadth. Surviving the odds is what we do. Arian looked at Lugard. Haven't you seen what Arthur Pendragon's summon evolved into? Even you have to admit that its potential is greater than most of ours. Let's not even talk about the 100 others with great potential. Even if you and I can hold back Arthur, what about those equally powerful throne and saint tiers working as agents under the authorities? Don't look down on yourself, Arian. You're the best talent we vagabonds have and the greatest there is, John Lugard said. But Arian, who would have smiled lightly at that, sighed. I think I've seen a greater talent. Just then something landed on Arian's branch, a tiger beetle, several feet tall, whose 6 legs were swords. A summoner stood on its back. With your new strength, the authorities will clean your files. If you just agree to the readjustment program, you can become an agent and have a proper family without living the life of a vagabond, the green-haired man with an anchor beard said professionally. His tiger night beetle could move at the speed of sound, though it couldn't see at that speed. Predicting his enemies was an adaptive skill he'd learned within 48 hours. "I decline," Arian said as the Oni Ronin walked past him, each step soft and precise, like a prowling lion about to launch. "Very well, the Oni Ronin didn't give the man time to finish as it swung its katana. The beetle deflected the strike and bolted forward. As the air exploded, a fierce clash of blades began, and though not as fast, the Oni Ronin was able to teleport using the wakizashi, countering the beetle's predictability. I'm old." John Lugard stretched his muscular back as a white viper hissed at him after slithering onto the branch he stood on. "Humanoid summons have flooded the streets," Seraphina, Queen of Polaris High, said faintly as she sat on the back of her peacock. Such beasts were not ordinarily meant to fly, but thanks to adaptive skills, every beast could evolve to overcome its flaws and weaknesses in ways that ensured its survival. She held tight to her summon as it leaned to the right, narrowly evading the bony fingers of a giant. This giant was 25 feet tall, but looked like it had been starved for centuries. It was no different from a walking bag of bones. A man stood on its shoulders, smirking as the skinny giant darted through the streets, crushing cars and destroying buildings. After eating a man's cow summon, 2 bird summons and a high tier, many had already fled from this summon. A group of guild combatants stood ready behind a blockade, watching the Polaris elites face this giant. "It's not being affected by Seraphina's puppetry," Nathaniel, Alastair bellowed as his phantom mantis became invisible. Nathaniel's summon, a black dreadclaw crab, scuttled toward the giant and slammed the earth. Rock spikes burst from the ground, 2 of them. They struck the giant, but to Nathaniel's shock, the giant's skin turned to stone. Alastair's mantis darted up the giant's legs, slashing at its back, but its blade arms barely cut deep. The giant's stone skin was harder than anything they had ever faced. "They're losing it," Charles from the Gate Defenders Guild said to Lotus. "I would have said we could deal with it, but that innate skill is a troublesome one. That's a tier 8.1 summon, its defenses at that tier are already overwhelming. With this innate skill, it's almost impossible to break through, even with reinforced bullets. I heard Manhattan High students are doing well in their missions. There's a reason they're the best," someone beside them muttered, clenching his rifle tightly. "They need to send them here. I don't think these Polaris can beat this thing on their own," another hunter, an elite tier, said while fidgeting. "They're here," someone shouted from the back, and everyone turned to see a golden-haired teenager in a Manhattan jacket standing in the distance. Charles's eyes widened. "Isn't he that kid?" "It's him," Lotus gasped. Godfrey's eyes were locked on the stone-skinned giant, which flung its chains at Nathaniel's crab. The crab tried to scuttle to the side, but the thick metal ball struck the asphalt road, pulling it upward and throwing both a huge portion of the asphalt and the crab away. Nathaniel swiftly retrieved it, while Lucian's vultures launched hundreds of steel feather projectiles, but they bounced harmlessly off the giant's skin. Since humanoid summons had no appetite for humans, seeing the giant focus on dealing with beast summoners and their summons instead of crushing the barricade wasn't much of a surprise. Godfrey squinted, inwardly noting the remarkable defense of the summon, which protected its summoner with one hand. If the giant could use both hands, it might have brought down the Polaris elites. Without the Dome of the King tier, Vega's city won't last long against a horde of undead. Isolde and the other members of the club are already there. I don't have much time. I have to deal with this thing quickly. Godfrey kept walking softly, his consciousness swirling in his mind as he maintained minimal scrutiny of his surroundings. All of a sudden, a man stood before him, the elected leader of the combined guild combatants gathered. "Are you the only one here, or should we expect others?" the man asked. Godfrey glanced at him. "I'm one of Manhattan's top 10 elites. I can help you handle this," he answered softly, then walked past the man. The combatant leader looked at a female hunter who shook her head. "I haven't seen him before. He must be new." The man's eyes widened. "Wait." Those words were blown back into his mouth as a huge gale exploded, swirling like a dust tide that sent the man tumbling backward. It was caused by Godfrey shooting forth at high speed in just one step. Each step generated a gale. When Godfrey reached the giant's foot, his white sclera turned black, his irises gaining a golden hue as his strength rose from 8.3 to 9.3, his blackout state. He lowered his body for a millisecond and burst upward. The speed at which he moved was even beyond his own calculations, almost making him miss the giant's head, but utilizing lightning-fast reflexes, Godfrey threw a punch. A punch with all the force he could draw from his body, as he gained the stone skin the giant had. His fist caused the air to burst outward, connecting with the giant's head in the next instant. Everyone heard a loud noise and turned toward it. 300 feet away, they saw the giant's head embedded in a skyscraper. Rode, the giant summoner, stared at his headless summon with wide eyes as blood dripped from his mouth. His gaze followed Godfrey, who somersaulted before landing lightly, smoke billowing off his knuckles. "Who is that kid?" Light faded from Rhodes' eyes as he fell from the shoulder of his falling summon. The lips of the man leading the combatants quivered. What? He didn't even unleash his summon, and he killed a Lord Tier in one blow. I thought all the King Tiers were gone. Where did this one pop out from? He muttered, too low for anyone to hear. Still cross-armed, Lotus slowly recovered from her shock and tied her pink hair, which had come loose from the gale generated by Godfrey's high-powered movements. "He's cool," she uttered, still reeling in awe. Charles nudged her. "Are you crushing on a high schooler?" he teased. Lotus pouted. "The age difference between us won't be more than 2. I simply chose to be a combatant. And besides, Godfrey looks like an 18-year-old with that muscular build and height of his." Charles was stumped by Lotus's openness. "Isn't that Godfrey?" Lucien couldn't believe his eyes as he watched the sophomore walk away. While they all wore shocked expressions, Nathaniel stared at the giant and thanked his luck that nothing had happened between him and Isolde that night. Had Isolde, the girl Nathaniel thought about, been there, she would have been more shocked than all of them. The reason was that one of her visions had failed. According to that vision, Tempest was supposed to kill the giant, and the entire world would come to know about Godfrey, leading to interviews and public fright over a summon that seemed angelic, like Cain's dark seraph. It was a crucial part of Godfrey's future, yet that event had vanished, all because of what she forgot to take into account. Though she avoided telling him so the future wouldn't twist, resulting in something far worse, like Godfrey becoming a full-fledged fanatic, Isolde's visions never once showed her this. Their current friendship wasn't supposed to happen. Godfrey wasn't supposed to have a friend who was powerful enough to push him to grow even faster. His ambitions at the tournament weren't supposed to exist. His emotions for her, that second warmth, were an anomaly, and they had birthed a tiny change. But this change was like a crack in a mirror. The probability of it spreading at the slightest touch was high. Oblivious to all this, Godfrey raced through the streets. Maybe the vagabonds wouldn't come too late this time. Maybe they wouldn't have to save an already broken boy. Or maybe he wouldn't be saved at all. Fate had cracked, new Tiers had arrived, and the King of the Shadows had finally made it to the undead desert dungeon after a couple of hours. Her presence alone couldn't change the future, Isolde had thought, and she was right, it couldn't. But emotions could. At Vega's, there were many injured people on stretchers, but there was no more battle, just people recovering from one. "What happened?" Godfrey asked a hunter sitting at the back of a truck. The man looked at him and blinked. "A girl ended the battle with her colleagues. I couldn't believe my eyes. Oh, you have the same jacket, are you among them?" Godfrey squinted. "Where are they?" "Climb up the wall, you'll see them." Godfrey went to the wall and climbed to the top. What greeted his eyes was the frozen sight of almost 4,000 undead. The cries and roars of a dragon made him lift his head. To the dragon soaring through the sky, Godfrey looked down, where Isaac and Lucy rested beside their summons, while Percival stood a few hundred feet away, looking back at him. The third-year student had his hands in his pockets, his jacket flapping softly. Godfrey was about to wave at Percival when he saw Grace charging up a strike. His eyes, and those of his friends, widened as Grace breathed a huge stream of thick white mist, a mist that froze an army of undead. "Is he mad?" Percival exclaimed. He watched as Godfrey stood there while the breath reached him. It covered him in a huge heap of snow, turning him into an awkward sight. A hunter drinking water spat it out and began to choke. A female hunter beside him had just been talking about Godfrey, only for him to become a snow dump in the next moment. "Snowman," Isolde giggled, her cheeks gaining a pink hue as her heart pounded hard. She knew Godfrey had the capability to escape, but he stood there. That level of trust made her feel warm. Grace tilted her head, looking at her summoner, who wasn't focused on anything at all. She was lost in her own fluffy inner world, but all that sweetness evaporated as a snowball found its target on Isolde's face. As her head tilted back, golden white hair flew all over the place. Her eyes gleamed dangerously, locking on the golden-haired teenager who had already thrown 3 more balls. They flew hundreds of feet into the air, smacking Grace's head. The dragon roared like it had been insulted. Both summon and summoner, vengeance in their eyes, dived toward Godfrey. Godfrey leaped off the wall, kicking it and propelling himself with force onto the rooftop of a building. He began jumping from rooftop to rooftop as Grace rained snow from the sky. People were stunned by the early Christmas, snow in a desert region. It was a dream come true, and Godfrey was no different from the ancient Santa Claus at that moment. Lucy covered her mouth as she giggled. How can they look at each other like they can't say a mean word to themselves one moment, and in the next, Isolde throws a tantrum. Godfrey's a victim. A victim, Isaac scoffed. He's made an exalted Pendragon act out before the eyes of thousands. No one would have believed she had this petty side, but it's also a declaration to all eyeing Isolde. A statement from Godfrey. I see a smart man at work. Isaac nodded at his conjured theory, which made Lucy laugh even harder, especially since it contrasted heavily with the young man fleeing for his dear life from an angry dragon and its rider. They know how to cut everyone off from their world. Percival's muffled voice rang through his nose mask. After Sebastian heard of it, he wanted Godfrey and Isolde to clean up their mess, but the people refused, insisting that it was a blessing instead. Shortly after this, the former king and queen Tears all around the world returned, showcasing the new powers of their summons against the rapid dungeon outbreaks. Some cities proclaimed being covered in darkness as Arthur Pendragon's dragon flew past. It was said to have 14 powerful heads, golden jagged scales thicker than fortress walls, and long black claws bigger than a man. Or returned, the same kind of awe people felt when summoners first appeared, as they watched Throne Tier summons, Saint Tier summons, and even Divine Tier summons head out to deal with dungeons. Another thing that shook the globe was the rapid strengthening of the world through mana. Rumors spread of people at the Throne Tier gaining the life expectancy of their summons, along with skills never before heard of. Among all this, the fight for the fruits of the mana tree was the fiercest. Though priced high, many families purchased them for their most talented members. Even Isolde was called back, along with the rest of Manhattan's elites. King Tiers, once in the hundreds, multiplied into tens of thousands within weeks, with even more showing potential. Lord Tier rose to tens of millions, High Tier to hundreds of millions. Unfortunately, with all these changes, Godfrey discovered his disadvantage. The armor of his summons couldn't be removed, so they couldn't eat the fruits, and neither could his castle. With no other choice, he had to hand over the fruit his mother had bought, worth tens of millions, back to her. Even if he couldn't rise, he was still a king tier, and that meant something, even in this new era of higher tiers. Although some people didn't eat the fruit, the surge in mana saturation caused a forceful evolution in their summons. A month later, with only a few days left before everyone in school would be checked by the gauging device for their summons tiers, Godfrey sat in his dorm room, all dressed for class. His eyes were shut as he stood within his soul space. Standing on the grand staircase, wide enough for 20 people to walk side by side, Godfrey didn't know what to feel. After looking at you and leaving in disappointment every day for an entire month, I finally understand that I am different, he said, looking at the grand castle. Godfrey shut his eyes and opened them again in the real world. He took his bag and left. A few minutes later, he entered the hallway and felt countless eyes on him. Of course, as one of the school's strongest, everyone was expecting him to have already shown signs, but their hopes were dying. The changes in summoners had nearly come to a halt by the start of the 4th week. This was the final day of the 4th week, and barely anyone was expected to show signs of evolution anymore. It's been an entire month. I've even risen to tier 5, and all the top 10 saw major boosts. I haven't heard a thing about Godfrey. Could it be that his summons are already at their overall limit? Gumgirl whispered to Janet, eyes wide. It might be, Janet replied. What I saw was tier 12.1 and an unclassified potential. Godfrey is definitely a throne tier even before all this awakening. The other elites, except Isolde, all have king or queen tier potentials and will get there eventually with the fruit's boost. But Godfrey's starting point is 12.1. Janet squinted, peeking secretly at him. He's definitely hiding once more. I wouldn't be surprised if he has Saint tier potential. Wait. Her eyes widened and she grabbed her mouth. Does that mean he has a 4th or even 5th summon? Jesus, where did he even come from? Gumgirl blew her gum, it burst, and she began chewing once more. Even Isaac has shown signs. His own is natural, and he might even gain a new potential, probably to the peak of Lord Tier or even higher. She looked at Janet with gleaming eyes. Hey, what if you go get your father's gauge device again? If it didn't work the last time, the new gauge is bound to. Do you know what the last one got me into? Janet yelled, attracting gazes toward her. Gum Girl lifted up her hands while leaning back. You didn't tell me, she said softly. Just then, two seniors, a boy and a girl, walked into the hall and went straight toward a girl who, after seeing them, tried to run. But the senior girl vanished, reappearing before the freshman with a scowl on her face. We've given you the money and you ditched us. Do you know who you're messing with? She struck a slap that sent the girl to the floor. The boy picked up the first year and bashed her head into the wall before turning to leave with her. Stop, Godfrey's voice made the seniors pause. The girl turned, raising an eyebrow at Godfrey. This is Tyler's business. Even with your strength, you would not be able to scratch the old her. Now that she has evolved, she's beyond your reach. Better keep your authority within your small club. Godfrey frowned. Clearly, this senior knew she couldn't beat him, but since they had the permission of someone higher in rank in the Manhattan top elites, they felt entitled. Godfrey's eyebrows drew close as he pondered. If he did such in the presence of Damien, the ex-king would definitely order him to let someone under his authority alone. They should have met him. As he was about to speak, a voice rang from behind him. Drop her. Godfrey turned to see Snow. The seniors looked at each other, then dropped the girl and harumphed before leaving. What a nuisance, the female senior spat as they left the hallway. You might be kind, but the structure of the world respects strength. Now that you've lost your advantage in terms of potential, how will you keep the structure you'd built? Snow said in a low tone, but he was certain Godfrey heard it while walking past him. If I'm not wrong, his strongest summon can reach 9 and be able to face 9.5 foes. That was beyond me before, but now, can I defeat him and reclaim the position of second? Snow thought as he watched Godfrey from the corner of his eye. He clenched his fists. I'll wait until everyone's tier is checked. In the seniors class, Rick walked up to the board and boldly wrote 9. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now a top-level Lord tier. Another senior scowled. That's nowhere close to Damien's 9.6, Vin's 9.3, and Tyler's 9.4 summons, all of which have King-Queen tier potentials. Whatever, we all got stronger. Rick shrugged before walking over to the trio. Damien sat on a chair, same for Vin, with Tyler sitting on the desk in between them, leaning against the wall. People will be scrambling for stronger fighters. Imagine untouchable king tiers being in the rings now. It will rake in big, Rick said as he sat to face the trio. So what about the plan to have the Shadow King fight for us? He's no weakling, and he has that tough spirit. We should recruit him to fight. He won't join, Damien said coolly. If we want to get him, our eyes should be on the freshmen close to him, people who need money. The moment his mother's source of income crumbles, we'll have our bait. Vin chuckled softly, finally. That night Damien, dressed in a suit, sat in a luxurious VIP room with Tyler and Vin. Vin had curled his hair, with golden rings on each finger. His curly hair didn't cover his excited golden eyes this time as he watched through the massive screen. The match was about to start. The arena was massive. It had no bleachers, just tall golden walls around the battleground. As the doors opened and summoners walked into the arena with their summons, a man walked into the trio's room. He wore a white top beneath a black vest, which matched his pants and polished shoes. How much will you be placing, and who is your candidate, esteemed guests? He asked with a smile. It's not often we get to see Lord Tiers fight. I've already placed 30 million on the summoner with the six-legged tiger, Damien said. Same, Vin nodded. I need a drink, Tyler said. Your usual miss, the man smiled brightly when Tyler nodded. It was a pleasure to serve these rich youngsters, as they were one of the big spenders. After the man left, Damien's phone rang. He picked it up. What? We've bought the land where the restaurant is from the owner. He's sending a letter for the woman to leave. Good. But you're spending even more money when you're supposed to be making it. I don't know the worth of this land. All these are investments. Also, I heard my mother is back. Is that true? Yes, but she has left for Queens and will be leaving the region tomorrow. Damien clenched his fist slightly, without even seeing her son. I see. He switched off the call, unbuttoned his collar, and exhaled loudly, his eyes fixed on the screen as the six-legged tiger was choked by the vines of the plant summoners, which kept tightening around the tiger's neck until it was unconscious. Damien's arm trembled as he removed his glasses. He had just lost 30 million. Plant summoners are the most shrewd kind of people I've ever known. They don't look like what they do. Vin scowled. We've been losing ever since our main fighter died 2 months ago. We need a new one. Tyler said as she rose to her feet. That same night in Manhattan Boys' dormitory, Godfrey lay on his bed, his consciousness within the soul's space. There he looked at the fourth door. Most of the door had turned to wood, only a little petrified part was left. He needed one more dungeon raid to see what was within. The itch made Godfrey rise up. Even though it was already past 8, he took a hoodie and left the dormitory. Before the staff in charge of monitoring the building during night hours could spot him, Godfrey turned invisible. He sneaked through others, leaping over the wall and landing lightly. After a few steps, he waved a taxi. As the taxi drove through the highway along with other cars, the bright lights from skyscrapers painted a picture on the window. Godfrey's eyes were locked on his phone. Even after reloading a couple of times, there was no real message about a Green Gate dungeon on his platform. The ones people had put there, after searching them out, he discovered had already been cleared. Do I have to go back? He bit his lower lip softly. After searching and searching, he leaned his head against the headrest, puffing out hot air from his mouth. Suddenly, a ping from his phone brought his face back down. It was a message from Isolde. Godfrey looked at the driver. Take me to the vintage shopping mall. Godfrey stepped down from the taxi, walking toward a huge mall turned dark. There was no sign of electricity from it, and a good number of armed policemen and guild parties were around the sealed-off area. His eyes locked on Isolde, who leaned against a truck, her arms crossed. Did your clairvoyance tell you I would leave the school? Godfrey's question made Isolde a bit startled as she turned to see him approaching. It did. Nyx has an obsession with you. Isolde's revelation made Godfrey uncomfortable. I hope this obsession doesn't reach the bathroom. Isolde chuckled. Funny enough, I haven't seen that yet. Yet? That's it. Isolde pointed at the grand shopping mall that now looked like a hollow shell of its past. Godfrey turned to the building. Is that the Green Gate dungeon you found? It is. It swallowed everyone in the mall, about 100 and something. A team of combatants and the authorities' agents have gone in, led by 2 Lord Tiers, but they're all dead, Isolde said solemnly. What? Isolde glanced at Godfrey. They don't know it yet. They have hope, but this isn't that kind of dungeon. There's no place to hide in there. So, are you going to clear it with me? I don't plan on going back without a core, Godfrey replied. Isolde raised her index finger. Unfortunately for you, I have a rule. None of us will use our summons, but the core belongs to you. Godfrey raised an eyebrow at her request but agreed to it. This was just a friendly rule. If the situation called for it, he would definitely call for his summons. As both of them approached the mall, they received lots of glances, but no one stopped them. When Isolde saw his puzzled expression, she spoke up. I spoke with them before you came. She said that as they both walked through the mall's entrance and immediately found themselves in an odd place. It was a space the size of a hall, but fogs were its walls, and the floor was like a chessboard. Standing 200 feet away were armored humanoid creatures. They were lanky, with silver-armored pauldrons, rerebraces, couters, vambraces, gauntlets, but their thin blue chest and abdomen with tight abs were exposed. From their waist down was also covered in silver armor, with a loincloth in, between their armored legs and a longsword in their hands. Their heads were round like a ball with one blue eye. All 20 of them were 7 high tiers. The mana levels from these pawns are quite high. Most Lord tier dungeons have 5.5 and a max of 6 for minions, Godfrey said. I'll handle them. You're good at hand-to-hand combat, Isolde said as she took steps forward. An ice spear manifested in her palm with icy mist billowing off it. Isolde brandished the long spear. Weapons are my forte. The moment she said this, Isolde launched herself forward, piercing through the head of the first pawn as the others encircled her. Pulling the spear out, she allowed the bottom to slam the second pawn backward before swinging the spear. The integrity of her item materialization skill had risen so high that the ice spear was able to bend like it was made of steel, slicing half of the second pawn's head off. It reverted back, cutting halfway through the abdomen of the third pawn. She stabbed the tip of the spear into the floor, and holding the shaft with one hand, lifted herself up and went around, kicking the pawns that launched themselves at her. Her kicks were like a frosty kiss of death. Each kick sent a pawn flying, and from that spot, ice would burst out into 10-foot-long spikes. After acting like a blade for a while, she flew up, leaving her spear and fell right on it, forcing the spear to sink deeper into the floor. Isolde dipped to one side, and the spear tilted almost to a crescent shape before it rebounded, launching off the ground. Isolde somersaulted several times with the spear, before splitting through the last pawn from its head down. The fog wall at the other end revealed a passage as she flipped her hair back. 20 high tears, killed gracefully. Isolde's spear skills were nothing short of deadly. Each move reaped a life, like some sort of spear reaper. Godfrey clapped softly. How long have you been training with the spear? Since I was 8. That's around the same time I started learning the ancient boxing style. The same time he used in gaining mastery in boxing was the same Isolde used to gain spear mastery. Both of them walked through the open path into the next, ascended a staircase, and entered the next hall with the same chessboard floor. 10 7-feet-tall hulking armored humanoids, built like living towers, stood in a row facing them. Their cuirasses were so bulky and huge that they made their helmets small. Their pauldrons also rose up like walls, making the heads even harder to damage. Green flames billowed upward from the top of their helms, and all these hulking armored creatures held warhammers. These 7.5 high tiers also had blue loincloths, but these ones had the symbol of a tower. Rooks, Godfrey muttered as he gripped Isolde's wrist before she took a step. You've had your turn, this is mine. Isolde looked at Godfrey as he walked ahead. With each step, piece after piece of armor manifested over his arms. 2 pauldrons guarded his shoulders, and his legs down to his sneakers were covered in exquisite golden metal plates. As Godfrey advanced, he meditated within him. This meditation was regulating his body, flexing ever so softly, as if sending signals to his muscles. There was one thing Edwin told him. Meditation wasn't really looking inwardly. In fact, the exact opposite happened during the exercise. Seeing him exhale, his eyes closed as a 7.5 high tier was already beside him, swinging its warhammer, made Isolde raise an eyebrow. That blow could crush a car. She could understand that he might be trying to impress her, but it was best if he fought normally. In that moment, as the hammer was inches away from Godfrey's cheek, his eyes snapped open, irises locking on the rook as he already began to move. With footwork honed over the years, Godfrey moved so smoothly to the side that it was like the floor was a slide. A solid punch connected with the rook's thick cuirass before the hammer could touch the ground, and the rook was sent flying, slamming into a solid object that seemed to be a wall behind the fog. There was a hole right through it. Isolde's eyes slowly narrowed. Another rook swung his hammer downward, right at Godfrey's head, but he stretched his hand out, grabbing the hammer's head. His fingers dug into the metal as he stepped on the rook's thigh, spinning his torso to generate enough force which he directed through his fist. The punch bent the rook's helmet inward, and it fell to its knees. Godfrey gently nudged the huge pauldron, and the rook fell. Another leaped, swinging the hammer down, while 3 charged from different sides. Golden lightning crackled first from Godfrey's fist to the rest of his body, before his eyes became storm-like. Lightning crackled as he flickered from one rook to another, launching several punches so fast that the sound of the rooks flying backward caused a shockwave. The 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th all engulfed their hammers with flames and slammed the earth, sending a wave of flames several feet tall and over 20 feet wide. Godfrey walked out of the flames, his golden pupils gleaming brightly from the middle of his black sclera. Flames swirled around him, burning where his feet touched. A gale blew as he launched himself at a rook, tearing through it with a punch. The 8th charged at him, swinging its hammer, but Godfrey casually slapped it, and the thick block of metal burst into metal chunks. He grabbed its cuirass and slammed its head right at his knee. Closing in on the 9th, he punched right at its hammer. The hammer broke, the rook's arm tore apart, and the second punch opened a hole through its chest. I tried, he turned to Isolde. Her eyes were on the 10th rook, which was just beside the 9th. One move and Godfrey was finished. His pupils narrowed as Godfrey tore a hole through its head, while still looking at her. He proceeded to stretch his arms while walking toward the new path that had opened up. Let's go. His voice rang. Isolde clicked her tongue and chased after him. On the next floor they saw 4 armored creatures with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a horse, a centaur. Clad in silver plates, a kite shield, a long spear, crests that billowed with flames and tails of blue flames, they were the ultimate knights. Each of them were 8 Lord Tiers and immediately galloped toward them, spears raised for the kill. Isolde took a step and ice crept out from where she stood, freezing everything in the hall, even the knights in their charging stance. How do you intend to beat me? Isolde smirked as the door to the next level opened up. You have a dragon with queen tier potential, or maybe even more with the fruits Grace has eaten, and your dragonfly also has such a tier. Symbiosis must have given you a feedback of their strength, which should make you as strong as a peak-level Lord tier or even a Queen tier, Godfrey said as he walked past the frozen knights. I admit, Isolde, you have the advantage, but I'll catch up. I'd love to spar once my 4th knight is out. You have a 4th knight, Isolde blinked. Godfrey glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. You're not fooling anyone, you know about it. That's why you brought me here, isn't it? What are you talking about? Isolde chuckled innocently, but Godfrey suddenly stopped walking, his face placid. That's why you've been helping me since I came to Manhattan. We both came to Manhattan on the same day, arrived at the same time, and you've been on my side ever since. He looked at her. Don't get me wrong, you did fool me. I mean, it did feel cool to have a beautiful girl looking out for you, and I liked that feeling, but after you told me about your ability, I've been thinking about it. He exhaled. You didn't make sense. You slipped when you said Nyx has an obsession with me. Godfrey finally looked at Isolde, who remained quiet. She clenched her teeth as the hand holding the spear trembled. I lie. It's all right. If my summon keeps showing me a pretty girl, I'd surely go. We might be fated, you know, that soulmate thing. Godfrey's casual statement made Isolde's cheeks grow red. So, Godfrey turned completely to face her. I really want to know, did we get together or some? Isolde launched her spear at him. It grazed his cheek, piercing the wall as she coldly walked past him. You dream. Godfrey shrugged. Maybe you just haven't seen it, yet. Isolde's eyes went wide. Outwardly she was fuming, but inside she was going hysterical. Did Godfrey just state his feelings for her without even realizing what came out of his mouth, or did he know? And he was using the same word she used earlier against him. A reverse blow. I've seen your future and you did get quite strong, and it all started from your 4th knight. Started, Godfrey raised an eyebrow. Then there are more doors to unseal, his heart pounded. Yes, Isolde approached him and pulled out the spear beside him, but if you want me to date you. Godfrey's heart pounded as Isolde stood really close to him. Date him, dating Isolde. So you'll stop right now, quit opening those doors and remain at your current tier. I don't need you to be stronger than me, I don't need you to face the world for me, just a quiet corner on a silent island will do. Everything fell silent in Godfrey's head at that moment. If he accepted, he would live out the dreams of most men out there. After all, his current strength was quite all right. Most men had to work hard to stand above to get their dream woman, but he was given a choice not to. But his mother, what about her? Would he leave her fate in the hands of the authorities, who had grown even more powerful with the appearance of new tiers? What about him? What if the authorities suddenly changed their mind and came for him? He heard they changed the memories of those who went to readjustment class, and they would have to keep revisiting for checkups until the day they died. He didn't wish for strength because he loved the thrill of it. No, the road to getting stronger was exhausting, most times boring as he had to meditate for hours, sometimes painful as he continuously endured hits. He had even lost an arm and was almost burnt alive by Dracula. Those pains were real. Maybe the Pendragon family would protect him and his mother, but against the authorities and the other families of other major cities. They would be at a major disadvantage. Godfrey wasn't a fool. For the authorities to turn a blind eye to such a strong humanoid summoner, especially after people like him had killed hundreds of millions in pursuit of godhood, turned millions to zombies, and caused several other hazards, his mother had to provide something extraordinary in return. It just felt wrong to be relaxed. Something in him didn't want to turn a blind eye to whatever sacrifice was done behind the scenes. He might lose something he couldn't afford to. Godfrey shut his eyes and walked past Isolde, heading toward the next floor with a resolute expression. Isolde's eyes became slightly teary. I see you've made your choice, she whispered, the fanatic who became a vagabond. Suddenly, the ice spear pierced the floor beside Godfrey, prompting him to turn to the red-eyed girl glaring at him. And who said you'd leave me behind? If he wished to continue growing, then by all means she would follow as his queen. She slipped. Had Godfrey agreed to her demand, the future would become unknown. Everything she had known until now would become useless. Her emotions swallowed her rationality, but all this was brushed aside as she faced off against 2 bishops. They had 4 arms, 2 of the lower ones were crossed, while the left upper one held a thick book, and a tongue of blue flames burned on the other. Their headpiece, a tall blue metallic hat resembling a bishop's mitre, but with a more rigid, armoured appearance, matched the blue steel-like skin of the bishops. Two blue-tipped tassels dangled from both sides of the hat. These 8.5 Lord-tier mage-type dungeon creatures launched huge fireballs the moment Godfrey and Isolde entered the hall. Bastion manifested in Godfrey's grip, blocking the fireballs. He lifted the bastion above his head and lowered his body as Isolde somersaulted, landing on the huge round shield. The shockwave that would have been released had it struck the floor burst out instead, sending intense vibrations and gale that blasted the bishops. One of them stretched forth a hand, conjuring a force field that blocked the wind, while the other was hurtled backwards. Isolde leaped, stabbing her spear through the chest of the one who conjured the force field, then kicked the bottom of her spear with so much power that it bolted through the bishop's chest like a ballistic bolt. The spear pierced into the heart of the other bishop, lodging it into the foggy wall. "Did you see what they were going to do before they did it?" Godfrey asked, and Isolde nodded. "How often?" Isolde smirked. "I won't tell." They entered the next floor, and this time there was only one entity in the hall. It was the Queen, sitting on levitating black, properly carved stones which had smaller ones below that supported her feet. Two huge chunks of rocks sat beside her throne. This queen wore a flowing gown with a frown, with butterflies molded around it hovering above her head, and her eyes were covered by metal flower wreaths. At the sight of them, the queen tapped the armrest of her throne, and the chunks of stone were telekinetically shaped into 10-inch-long earthen spikes, coated with a metallic substance before their very eyes. 40 of these spikes flew toward them at breakneck speed. This was an attack from a 9 mini-boss existence. It had the power to kill a 9.5 if careless. Godfrey blocked the attack with Bastion, but for the first time, the shield was almost pierced through. With white wings spread out, Isolde flew above Godfrey and crossed the distance between her and the Queen with a single flap. Godfrey activated Ricochet and Reflect. Wounds opened up on the Queen's body to her shock. As if that wasn't enough, the spikes were coming back to her. Her elegance vanished as she waved her hand, sending all of them clattering onto the floor, but Isolde ignored her telekinetic prowess, piercing several holes through the Queen's body in an instant. She spun the spear, cutting through the Queen's throat. The Queen staggered back and fell as her throne crumbled. Isolde turned back only for her smile to turn into shock, as she saw Godfrey had turned his shield into a translucent half-dome blocking the spikes. Apparently the Queen wasn't exactly helpless in that split second. The aid she called for was blocked by Godfrey. Had it not been for him, Isolde would have suffered at least 2 injuries from the spikes. "Thank you," Isolde said sincerely. Knowing that Isolde liked him only made her compliment more effective. It jumbled his emotions, and he could only define this feeling as sweet. There was no other word for it. Both of them walked into the last floor and found the king. Lots of swords were stabbed into the floor around the throne. On it sat an armored entity with a fur-padded cloak and a floating crown attached to his crown-like helmet. He leaned on one arm while holding a longsword with the other. The pressure of a 9.5 Lord tier fell on Godfrey. The king rose to his feet, lifted its sword, and swung it before approaching them with slow, heavy steps. It was a 9.5 feet tall existence. Godfrey didn't even reach its chest. Isolde brandished her spear. After eating the fruits of the mana tree, her summons had gone through evolution. Grace became the hornless ice dragon with a tier of 10.1 and a potential of 12.1, while Nyx gained the actual strength of its species, becoming an 11.5 queen tier with a potential of 14.5 throne tier. As for her final summon, it still hadn't entered the known part of her soul, limiting her to less than 10% of its capabilities. She didn't even know its exact looks. Her situation could be considered an illness, but for summoners. With a personal strength of 11, she was capable of handling this boss with ease, but she still didn't know its ability. "Isolde," Godfrey said, pointing at a writing on the throne. "Dragon's Bane, what?" Her eyes narrowed. If that was right, it meant this main boss was equipped to suppress and kill dragons. To her surprise, her senses wavered, like she was poisoned. The closer the king got, the worse the feeling became. Even the floor began to wobble, and Isolde started to perspire. Godfrey manifested a giant bow and drew it to its full capacity. His arms trembled as the force of the draw took everything from him. The king was already close. It cocked its head when it saw the bow but didn't move to kill. Its pride was beyond the clouds. Possessing an ability that could weaken dragons much stronger than you would, of course, make anyone feel that way. But it made a mistake underestimating Godfrey's bow. The moment the arrow was shot, the king staggered back, staring in disbelief at the huge arrow protruding through him. Activating Ballista's ascendant skill, Godfrey's entire body emitted steam, his muscles trembling as he summoned arrow after arrow, unleashing them like a human minigun. He wanted to get rid of this boss before it threw off that pride, and decided to get serious. Isolde couldn't help much, as she was fighting against her poisoned internal system. With all of his might, Godfrey kept shooting until he couldn't. His fingers bled as his knees gave out. It felt like his entire system was shutting down from such a high-powered skill. "I didn't name this skill. I'll call it Ballistic Havoc," Godfrey said internally as he stared at the king, now a porcupine with the number of arrows sticking out of it. Isolde was finally able to breathe. She began to realize she was on all fours, almost at the verge of collapsing. She had never felt anything like that before. New dungeons, of course, brought strange abilities they had never heard of. It made entering dungeons a lot more dangerous now. "Hey, are you all right?" Godfrey's voice made her turn to the golden-haired boy lying flat on his back. "I haven't seen you like that before. It was scary," Godfrey said, concern still in his eyes as her pretty face reflected within them. Isolde crawled over and laid on his chest. "I have never felt like that. It was like the air I breathed became toxic, and my organs wanted to explode. I would have loved to hold your hand, but mine's useless at the moment. It'll take a while for my healing to kick in," Godfrey said between breaths, and Isolde reached out, entwining her fingers with his blood-stained ones. Godfrey smiled softly. "Your hands are really soft and small." Isolde's cheeks flushed, and she slammed her elbow into him. Godfrey cried out, forcing her to apologize countless times. After resting for a while, Godfrey rose to his feet with fully healed fingers and took the dungeon core. Tempest came out of a portal and absorbed it. The Chief Knight broke through the barrier, advancing from a high tier into an 8.2 Lord tier. Godfrey sat on the throne and shut his eyes. He appeared in Tempest's chambers and saw that the next door was fully unsealed. Exhaling heavily, he pushed it open. Godfrey frowned as what he saw wasn't another chamber, but a hallway with towering statues of mounted knights. He walked to the end of the hallway and saw another door. Written above it was, "He who rides with the dead, the weeping knight." Godfrey pushed the door open and found a chamber filled with grey fog. It was so thick that he couldn't see anything. "Archduke," a deep voice rippled through the grey fog, "I have longed for your arrival." Something metallic slammed the floor, and the grey fog blasted away, revealing a golden-armored knight on an equally armored horse. The knight and his huge horse were a total of 13 feet, though individually, both were 9 feet tall with incredible mass and golden armored plates. His armor was exquisite, with the Spartan-like helmet having 2 thin cuts downward from the eyeholes like tears that cut through steel. Where a plume should have been was the design of a small tree, or more like a cluster of golden foliage. A solemn aura swirled around this knight, whose size and height made Godfrey's other knights look small. "It feels like he's always lamenting," Godfrey said, pushing against the tide of fear emanating from the mounted knight as he approached the tablet. "I already have a name for him, Lament." Godfrey looked at the tablet. "Summon Chief Cavalry Knight of the Golden Order. Type Hybrid. Tier 9.5. Potential 12.5. Description: alchemically altered to bear the powers of the Dark Lich Lord. This Chief Knight in blackout state can raise a maximum number of 3,000 heavy cavalry, Golden Order cavaliers who perished in the battle against the Dark Lich Lord, as Knight Cavaliers. The moment Godfrey opened his eyes in the real world, his irises shrank as he found almost 100 people around them. Some of them held shopping carts, some were with their families, children. They kept stepping out of the fog, stunning even Isolde. According to her vision, no one who entered that dungeon came out, and when that happened, especially when the dungeon was the type that threw you straight into battle without hiding spots, death was guaranteed. In her vision, a policeman was giving a report that everyone in the shopping mall was probably dead, and that they would guard the place until more powerful parties were sent, but then the dungeon turned black, and all the policemen were slaughtered. The dungeon was never cleared. Isolde gasped inwardly. "Are we saved?" an 8-year-old girl asked her mother, who covered her mouth, crying softly. "What's going on?" Godfrey whispered to Isolde. "I don't know," Isolde replied, shaking her head. "It might be that this dungeon filters lower tiers." She looked around. "Where are the people who first came to rescue you?" By the time they reached the knights, most of them were already dead, and those knights slaughtered the last 2 Lord Tiers, a man explained. The fog grows colder with time. Some of us need medical attention. He pointed at a few people suffering from the cold. We wouldn't have made it. As the man spoke gratefully, the dungeon slowly disappeared, and they all found themselves in the shopping mall. Hey, a loud voice made all the policemen and guild members lingering around turn to the golden-haired teenager who broke out of the door with a pale baby, almost blue with frost. Those with summons at the elite tier were still quite healthy, but most of the low tiers were slowly succumbing to the cold after enduring for several hours. "They're out," a policeman shouted, racing toward Godfrey. His eyes widened at the sight of the child and the others. The chill from their bodies came with an unnerving grey fog. "Get the medics." As everyone rushed about, Godfrey watched as the child was taken from him. He stood there, reminded once again why dungeons were still dangerous even after 100 years. It was because of this that many went in as a team, and yet Greengate dungeons had the second highest death rate. The most dangerous dungeons were the ones with strange rules. Seeing the chaos around him to save lives, Godfrey suddenly thought that if there was a sentient being behind all this, one who took pride in placing dungeons to kill and cause losses, then that being should be tortured and slaughtered in the worst way possible. "I guess you saved a lot of lives today without knowing it," he said to Isolde, who stood beside him. Isolde exhaled. "If I had gone in there alone, I might have failed against the boss. He was my bane. I've never heard about a dragon's bane." Isolde's comment made Godfrey suddenly think about the Golden Order Knights. Their duty was to slaughter beasts, and they had such hate for them that they had even gone as far as altering themselves to kill stronger beasts. "They were the bane of beasts. Could be why Nyx made sure you took me along. She also saved a lot of lives," Godfrey said with a light-hearted tone. "She needs a gift." Isolde chuckled. "That would be meditating for almost an entire day and feeding the mana to her. She does love that, but you'll miss me for an entire day," she said coyly. Godfrey grunted, caught at a hard spot. Suddenly, he spotted a white-haired teen leaning against the car Isolde leaned on before they entered the dungeon. It was John. He watched them with crossed arms for a moment before standing and walking toward them. "I've been calling you," John said, looking straight at Isolde. Godfrey narrowed his eyes slightly at how John completely disregarded him. "Couldn't you take a hint since I didn't pick your call? You probably had someone track me, but I really don't need your help right now," Isolde replied. John smiled and shook his head. "Then you need his help, him over me." "John, don't bring this up again. You started it, this idea of choosing. I've been showing you Godfrey's paintings since elementary and you loved it. Why are you?" "I hate it," John's deep, hard voice interrupted Isolde. Her eyes widened in shock. "I've always hated you showing me his stupid picture. Look at his hair this, look at his eyes that. You've had everything from birth, your parents, your summons, your amazing life me." John trembled and pointed at Godfrey, still without looking at him. "But you are willing to throw that all away for him. His mother is just a doctor. She's probably looking for a job after spending a good quota of her savings to purchase a mana fruit. This world has a hierarchy. He might be strong, but he'll never be worth anything." John finally looked at Godfrey. "No humanoid summoner has ever been any different, even if they're king tier. You must have grown stronger now. Unleash that summon of yours." John opened a portal, and his white death weasel came out. It had grown to 10 feet, with a powerful pair of digitigrade legs, long black blades extending from its arms, and long black hair fluttering in the unseen wind. Seeing several eyes on them, as John made a mockery of his status, made Godfrey boil. The whispers made his eyes cold. "John," Isolde yelled as a huge white portal opened above them. As Grace was about to emerge, Godfrey tapped Isolde's shoulder. "He didn't challenge you." He took 2 steps forward, and a diagram flared up beside him. John's eyes narrowed as a towering knight on horseback emerged. As it swung the mighty halberd, a huge gale blew, almost pushing people from their initial positions. Another knight, John's eyes narrowed. His weasel had risen to 9.4, and it could challenge a 9.9. Lament moved out at that moment. His mount leaped, landing right where the weasel stood. The weasel burst into smoke, reappearing and slashing at Lament's shoulder, but its blade bounced off. John couldn't even react to the shock, as Lament swung his halberd so fast that it was disproportionate to his size. It sliced through the weasel's chest, opening a huge gash as blood spilled. The impact flung the weasel backward, but the huge horse Lament rode on struck its hind legs into the weasel's chest, blasting it at higher speed. John couldn't believe his eyes as his weasel tore through the walls of the mal. Its bones shattered like broken glass as that kick alone caused a shockwave. It was just a thread away from death, but John couldn't even consider that as the sharp halberd lightly kissed his neck. Just that soft contact, and there was already a cut. Blood dripped down his neck, but when his eyes met Lament's own, John gasped. He couldn't see anything in the space carved into the helmet, but he felt so small at that moment. At that moment, Godfrey heard the clicks of guns. Over 3 dozen policemen aimed their rifles at him, the bright white lights boring into him from all sides. He didn't heed to the laws, a policeman said to another. He might have ignored his monthly visit for readjustment, another replied, breathing heavily. Certain their bullets wouldn't work on Lament. Their captain pointed his pistol at Godfrey. Let the boy go. A portal appeared above, and a beautiful, hornless white dragon emerged, stomping hard on the ground as he roared at the policemen. He just saved the lives of hundreds, and you aim a gun at him, Isolde yelled. Ha ha ha, humanoid summoners have their summons feast on us. He's probably been drooling over your dragon since he hasn't gone through any readjustment. You think I haven't figured out the headmaster is protecting him? John said with bloodshot eyes. Your kind crippled my elder sister. She watched as her summon was killed and dragged away. He's different, the same little girl said softly. He saved us. Then it's better he goes through the readjustment program, the man who spoke earlier said with a sigh. People won't feel safe, especially after the onslaught of Kane's fanatics. There are thousands rioting for justice. Their summons weren't just killed, they became food. There's nothing more painful than that. Godfrey looked at everyone, their glares, their fearful stares, with little disturbance. He had done his research after the deserted city dungeon. The hate for humanoid summoners was real. It was like the discrimination between whites and blacks long before the past age met its catastrophic end. We won't shoot, just retrieve your summon and take the cuffs. You have a good heart. There's no need for this to go beyond this level, the captain said, eyes darting to several guild combatants who had already unleashed their summons. Let's go, Isolde said, mounting Grace with Godfrey. No one could bring themselves to shoot at a pendragon, nor would their weapons work on a dragon of that size. As Grace flew, the end of her tail slapped John, launching him right through a car and deep into another, bleeding heavily as he fell unconscious. Fear sank into everyone's hearts. You are lost, Lament's words shook everyone as he was retrieved. I at sea can speak, the captain's heart palpated. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel, or want next part of any series, comment down.